The next morning I drove down to the North Bar Landing and hiked north along the coast of Lake Michigan toward the dunes. I was interested in the scenery of the coastline below the dunes, and rather than descend the bluffs 250 feet to the shore, I decided to save my energy and drive to an easy access point.
Hey gang, today's Friday, August 16th. This morning I drove over to the North Bar and dropped off the truck and hiked up the coast of Lake Michigan to the edge of where the sleeping bear is, perched up on the dunes behind me here. And it's a real beautiful morning down here. I wanted to see what the coast looked like down here, as opposed to looking at it from up on the bluff, which is, well, good 250 feet up, I would say, at least. It's a long climb down to the shoreline from the bluff. Last night I hiked around a little bit and did some scouting, and I think I set up a shot that I settled on for this evening at sunset, back up on top of the sleeping bear. It's kind of a chaotic area where there's a bunch of trees. It's an old forest with a bunch of dead trees, and all that's left really is just all the trunk. Looks like it may have been a pine forest at one point in time, years and years ago. But there's also some beautiful shots down here. Lots of rocks along the shoreline of Lake Michigan. I don't know if you can see behind me, but back off this way is the Manitou Islands, and it's actually an old Indian fable or legend that the Sleeping Bear Dunes were formed when a mother and her two cub bears, decided to make the swim across Lake Michigan from Wisconsin. It was kind of turbulent on Wisconsin, and they wanted to make for the Lake Michigan coast. So they made the swim across, but as they neared the coast of Michigan, the two bear cubs began to tire out, and the seas got really rough. The mother made it to shore, climbed up on shore, but the two cubs couldn't make it, and they drowned just offshore. And that is what you see in the background. The Manitou Islands signify the two bear cubs that drowned, and the perched dunes of Sleeping Bear Dunes and the sleeping bear itself are said to be the mother cub who has fallen asleep and awaits the awakening of her two cubs that have drowned offshore. So it's kind of a sad story. And up on top of the sleeping bear, where these trees are in this area, you kind of get a somber feeling up there when you walk around. It's kind of a feeling of death or a past life. It's really beautiful. It's unique. It's very surreal up there. So that's what we're going to do tonight, is go up and try to capture a shot from up there. I'm going to try with Fuji Velvia 50, and then I'm going to try a shot of the Kodak Ektar 100 to see the difference between the two. And that's it. I apologize. I know the audio probably isn't very good. We've got Lake Michigan here splashing up on the shore, and I'm just relying on the camera that's inside the Hero 3 right now, or the mic inside the Hero 3. I bought an external adapter to take external audio, but I haven't purchased the mic yet. I'm looking at a Rode boom mic, but we'll sort all that out in the future and definitely try to get better audio and better video quality. But in the meantime, we're here, and let's capture what we have. So I'll check with you later.
Later that afternoon, I made my way back into the park to the trailhead that led out to the Sleeping Bear. The Sleeping Bear Dunes became a national park in 1973, joining the lakes of Cape Hatteras and Big Sur. The park covers a 35-mile stretch of Lake Michigan Lakeshore and includes the North and South Manitou Islands. Other parks along the Lake Michigan coastline were not as lucky as the Sleeping Bear Dunes. Parks such as the Silver Lake Sand Dunes still incur a lot of ORV traffic, which damages the natural beauty and balance of the land.
So we're here on top of the Sleeping Bear, and sun is setting. We're still waiting for it to get a little lower on the horizon, but made it up here probably about 2 hours ago, and just been setting up the 4x5 and working on the composition, working on depth of field. The sun is actually off here to the west, setting over Lake Michigan and casting the light back here onto our composition, which is this old dead forest of what looked to be pines. And first thing I noticed is, of course, as the sun got lower on the horizon, that the shadow that the 4x5 was casting was growing into the composition. So I had to end up lowering the camera quite a bit and making some adjustments to the bellows. I think I actually like the composition a little bit better. Of course, the camera's shadow is starting to creep back into the shot as it gets lower, and I don't know, I'm gonna see how we're doing here in the next 10 minutes or so. But really everything in the composition is metering about 2 stops difference, so not a lot of crazy dynamic range to worry about here, which is kind of cool for this. So we'll see what happens. I want it to get a little bit lower. It looks like we got another half hour before it touches the horizon and starts to dip into the lake. The moon is up and it's looking really beautiful. There's a lot of beautiful atmosphere out here. It's really a beautiful place. Definitely would recommend coming out here and checking it out. I'll show you the setup here real quick. So we're shooting off into this dead forest of pines here, and you can kind of see what we're looking at. It's really kind of cool, surreal looking, kind of chaotic, but just really interesting composition. And here's the 4x5, ebony 4x5 set up right here. Like I said, I was quite a bit higher. I've ended up lowering it down and raising the front of the bellows and the lens up and kind of tilting it back a bit to try to keep the shadow out, which is steadily growing back into the shot. So I don't know how that's going to work out here in the interim. There is Lake Michigan and the setting sun, and yeah, it's gorgeous out here. It really is. It's like no man's land. So I'm hoping the shot I'm gonna take of this is just as the sun drops a little lower, it kind of turns kind of pinky out here, like a rose almost. So I'm going to kind of wait for that. Hopefully that shadow stays low enough on the camera. And I'm going to take 2 exposures, one on Fuji Velvia 50 and then one on Kodak Ektar 100, and just to compare the difference. And then I'm going to wait a little longer, maybe about 40 minutes or so after the sun has dipped down, and I'm going to take an exposure on Kodak Portra 160 and see how that looks. And then I'm going to get the heck out of here because it's quite a hike back to the truck and I'm pretty low on water. So we'll see how things go. My aperture right now, I did a depth of field calculation, and the hyperfocal distance is about 10'9", which is about where that spike, that stake looking piece of the tree is sticking out. And I calculated back to 120 feet or so, so that's well into the background. So we should be good for that. Shooting at f/32 here today. And then we'll see what the exposure ends up being here as the sun dips a little bit lower. Okay, so it's been about an hour, I think, since we last logged the report, and the sun finally sank back into Lake Michigan, and right as it was kissing the horizon, probably about halfway down into the lake, I decided to make the first exposure on Fuji Velvia 50, and aperture was f/32. With the polarizer, everything worked out to be about a 30-second exposure. So we'll see how that turned out. Wasn't a lot of variance between the subject matter and the sky. Everything was within a stop of each other. So that worked out pretty good. We won't have to worry about highlights and shadow areas being too blown or blocky, hopefully, if we did the exposure correctly. Then probably about 10 minutes later, did the second exposure on Ektar 100 and Kodak Ektar 100, and that was about a 20-second exposure, calculating for the polarizer, just trying to blue the sky a little bit as the sun went down. We'll see how that worked out. The shadow in the foreground I had mentioned earlier didn't end up being an issue. As the sun sank lower behind the bluff, the shadows just softened up, and you couldn't distinguish any shadows whatsoever. So that actually worked out real well. Was getting a little bit nervous there for a minute, but thought might have to do some Photoshop work and didn't really want to do that. We'll see how it turns out when we get it processed, get it home, get it processed. But it's amazing. It's amazing out here. It's gorgeous. I think tomorrow I'm probably going to return to the same spot, and there's another pretty wicked tree over here behind me that kind of looks like a raggedy hand, and the index finger's kind of pointing out over Lake Michigan, and the moon is tracking right across between the branches, and it's got some interesting foreground dune grasses in front of it. It's incredibly still tonight. Yesterday, windy. I was thinking, man, there's no way you could shoot film out here, do long exposures, but it's dead calm out here right now. A slight little sway to some of the grasses, but barely noticeable. Really great conditions right now for shooting large format. It's beautiful. I really hope this one turns out. I'm excited to see how it looks when we get back home. So I was kind of thinking I might do one more exposure since I'm here of the Portra 160. I was gonna wait about 40 minutes after the sun had set and try that just to see what kind of colors were present with a longer exposure at that time. I'm going to check the stopwatch and see how we're doing. It's a little bit of a hike back to the car. It's dark out here. I got a big pack, and I've probably got about a gulp of water left, which was kind of stupid on my part. Should have brought the Camelback out here, but I didn't. Yesterday I hiked around out here for hours with just my like my 3-liter bottle, and I was fine. But that's how it goes sometimes. Anyway, we'll check in with you tomorrow. This will be the last log for today.